All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And as you can see, today I am joined by a very special guest. This is a man who was drafted in the 6th round in 2002 by the New Orleans Saints, threw his first career touchdown pass to the Calvin Johnson, and started 8 games for your San Francisco 49ers in 2008. For my money, he now runs the most educational YouTube channel when it comes to quarterback play, Mr. JT O'Sullivan. How you doing today, my man?
What's up, Jesse? I'm excited to be here. Appreciate it.
Good, man. Hey, listen, I'm used to like the bookshelf normal setup behind you. It looks like you're outside during the day having a good time. So appreciate you taking the time today, my man.
Yeah, it's a little crazy inside the house right now. So came out, figure I'd give you a little, not try to keep the background noise to a minimum.
I feel it, man. I totally feel it. All right, brother. Listen, just so that we can get to know kind of what's important to JT O'Sullivan when it comes to quarterback traits. If you were able to go back and give young JT an elite trait, any trait you want, what trait would you give to young JT O'Sullivan?
Well, there would be a long list. I think the hard thing to grasp for me and probably for many people is that unfortunately it's never just one thing. Now you can have some things that are disqualifiers. You know, if you're maybe not 5.5 feet tall, you're going to struggle to play quarterback. If you're not 6 feet tall, you're probably going to struggle to play quarterback. If you're 6'6", you have a significant advantage. But with being 6'6", you have to also be able to move, or else you're a statue. Now you see guys that are in the league that are that size that can move, and I think it gives them a huge advantage when you couple that with a massive arm. You know, coming from a guy who probably didn't have a massive arm, that would probably be my first kind of initial trait that I would probably love to kind of like increase on my capacity. But, you know, I think it is one of those things that it's all of those things. I would have loved to have been 6'5". I would have loved to have had a cannon. I would have loved to have, been able to be a little bit more of a natural runner, even though when I was playing, it wasn't necessarily the same quarterback run game. But, at the end of the day, you have what you have, and you kind of build your kind of skill set around that. I can remember, I don't know if I've ever told this story before, and it's timely because Mike Martz has just been going crazy on my timeline for some reason. But I remember.
I think I could maybe shed some light on that one for you.
Yeah, no, I know why too. I remember I don't know if I was competing for the backup job in Detroit or if I was with the 49ers, but I remember Mike sat me down. It was during a kind of a one-on-one. He liked to coach quarterbacks on a one-on-one basis. And so he asked me, he's like, what do you think your strongest trait is? And I think at the time I said something about timing or accuracy or putting the ball where it's supposed to go, probably the best way to say it. And he was like, that's not it. He's like, the best thing you do is how you see the field. And so I always kind of took that to heart, and I think it helps the channel a little bit with just how I see the game and how I try to communicate it. But to me, that was always one of those things that just came almost intuitively. And I think it increases when you get more reps and play more ball. But to me, that was the easy part. That's the easy part, to be able to see it and kind of know where to go. Now, can I get it where I need it to go? That's a harder thing.
Now, you talked a lot about how today, you see a lot of mobile quarterback. I mean, we've got the Herberts, the Allens, the Mahomes, so many great quarterbacks. And like you said, they're all physically gifted. They're mentally gifted. Do you think this might be the golden age of quarterback play based off of, history of the NFL potentially?
It sure seems like we're in a sweet spot. I like to phrase it as a sweet spot because you really do have the kind of guys who have done it for a long time at a really high level.
Mm-hmm.
And those guys are still playing at a really high level. I think that's the thing that, the longevity element of it has created this sweet spot that's just bigger, across the ages. And so, guys like Brady, guys like Rodgers that are doing it at a really high level, and Breeze for the last, handful of years. And then you've got this young group that are really a collection of unicorns. When you look at it, they're just about what you talk about. And I think it's kind of a representation about what the position is and how it's changed over probably the last 2 decades, all the way from the youth game to the pro game, where the best athlete is playing quarterback. And that's great for the quarterback position. Back in the day when I was growing up, the best athlete might play running back or might play middle linebacker. And, nowadays, a Pez athlete's going to say, no, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to take the quarterback position. And so I think it's made the game better, certainly made it more enjoyable for me and what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, it sure is fun when you get to see those games with, Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, or last night we got to see Herbert versus Mahomes. I mean, that's just must-see TV. It's a ton of fun. Let me ask you this, JT. So for me, one of the things that I wish people understood about playing quarterback, and this is coming from a novice eye, but I feel like everybody thinks that you just see the full field at once. Like they can see something, they see a wide receiver running wide open over here, and they don't understand why the quarterback doesn't always see that. And so it's always frustrating to me when you're talking with people and they don't understand, like, this isn't Madden. You don't see the full field at once. It's not necessarily how it works. But for you, like, if there was just one thing that you could just let the average fan know about playing quarterback that would possibly make them more intelligent as they're looking at the game, what would that be?
Well, I mean, I'll just keep it in the same lane that you were talking about. It's not only what you see and, not necessarily having the ability to be like at that macro perspective, kind of like that, what I call like the video game perspective, where you can change the lens, you can change the angle, you can change whatever you like, all those types of things. You're playing it. And I try to say it occasionally through the channel, is you have to play the game through the helmet, at eye level. And so it changes everything. And one of the parts of playing quarterback and the relationship to how the offense is coordinated, the architecture of the offense, is the timing of where, first of all, you have to know where your eyes are supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. And the timing of your drop, your footwork, and the perimeter, the depth, the timing, the coverage. All of those things come together and create a really complex cocktail that can change all the time on every single play, every single series. And so that part of it just compounds and can make it feel like it's very complicated. I think when you get a moment to just kind of say, hey, are we on the same page as far as the timing, the rhythm, the anticipation, everybody knowing what they're supposed to do and supposed to understand where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, well, then it looks like a great symphony. But if someone's doing their own thing, going rogue, or you don't have that timing, that feel, that rhythm, or your eyes aren't in the right spot, it can look like a train wreck really quickly. And that's why you see, maybe younger guys in the league playing the quarterback position that have to learn the timing, the rhythm, and where their eyes are supposed to be. Because it's not just, hey, throw it to the open guy like you're playing a video game. Because when you get hit for real. Like we saw last night with Herbert. He's hit for real. He's hurt. He's that's impacting his play. Now, he overcame it and completed a couple of ridiculous passes at the end of that. But that's playing quarterback in the league. That's literally the toughness, the physicality that goes along with all those other physical traits, all those things about rhythm, timing, anticipation, accuracy that come together. That's why those guys are so special and why so few can do that.
You just know so much about the position, JT, and going back to Martz's comment where he said that, you just understand the game at a really good level. Would you ever entertain being like a personal quarterback coach or an actual QB coach for a team? Has that ever crossed your mind or been a thought of yours?
I mean, it certainly crossed my mind. I kind of intentionally stay out of that game just because I moved around, got cut, fired so many times playing. Yeah. I just don't. That's just not what I'm looking for right now or ever. But I do still love the game. And so this kind of sweet spot for me where I get to talk about the elements that I really like, communicate, give back a little bit to the game, but also kind of, just enjoy it and have fun with it. It has been a lot of fun. And I would never have thought that I would enjoy it as much as I do. So, not really is kind of the best answer.
Yeah. No, I understand. I mean, it seems like you're settled. You got your family, your kids are still at that age where they need dad involved. So completely understand that. But I just love the knowledge. I mean, you bring so much knowledge to us, the fans, and for anybody that's not subscribed, the link is in the description for JT's channel. I can't imagine that you're not subscribed at this point, but definitely give it a look. You talked a lot about quarterback development. And one thing that you said very early is that quarterbacks sometimes just need time to play. In your opinion, we get these quarterbacks that are drafted really high. I think some expectations might have shifted with guys like Patrick Mahomes or Herbert, just the way that they were able to come in and light the league on fire almost immediately from taking a snap day one. But in your opinion, when these guys are drafted, how long do you think they should be given to develop before we just say, hey, this kid is not it, or hey, this kid is it?
Well, there's no easy answer. There's no cookie answer. I think the best answer is they need to play as quickly as possible. That's the reality of the game nowadays for a few different reasons. First of all, so to your point, like, is this it or is this not it? And then the second point is you got to take advantage of that rookie deal to build out the rest of the roster. You know, you see so many teams that get an opportunity to hit on that young quarterback. Well, then they go out and spend everywhere else to take advantage of that before they have to pay the quarterback. And so there's multiple layers to it. The other thing about playing, and I might have framed it like that, the way that you said about the quarterback just needs to play, but, and I know my channel is quarterback centric, but players need to play. Like everyone has to play. And so the quarterback is magnified for a few different reasons, mostly because of the decision making and you touch the ball every play, but there's also only one of them. So if you draft a linebacker in the first round, he's going to play for sure. We got a couple spots. We'll find a spot for you. You know, you're going to get an opportunity where if you're a first round quarterback and you've got a guy who just maybe took you to the Super Bowl, maybe you don't play your first year. And so, you know, that kind of thing can really just delay some evolution of your game improving. And really the trajectory and speed of your improvement, I think, is tethered to you playing. And you touched on it, but you have to play well. You know, I think probably a lot of the people that are 49er fans are probably freaking out after one rain game where, you know, you just have to have the capacity to take a deep breath and realize that those people in the building probably have a pretty good understanding of what they're doing. Certainly have proven that they're pretty good offensively, and to give them the benefit of the doubt here of a few weeks, if not a few months, to figure this thing out. And I personally am really excited to see, you know, Trey Lance. And I think he's got a chance to light the league on fire. You know, just because he didn't do it in a monsoon doesn't mean that he didn't have flashes of what potentially can come. And I'm fired up to see what it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad that you said that. And Baruna is asking a question along those lines. He says, trying to figure out why there's so much hatred towards Trey. Any thoughts? Also, what are your thoughts about Jimmy being in the locker room? I probably asking more from like a locker room dynamic. Can that cause some difficulties for Trey or the team? Just what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily think that there is significant hate towards Trey. You know, I think it's a complicated situation. You got a guy who's been successful and been a really winning quarterback in the league when he's healthy. Okay, so you got to put disclaimers around it. We've had some health issues. It's impacted the overall performance of the organization. Compound that with the fact that potentially he can't do everything. I'm talking about Jimmy Garoppolo here. He can't do everything that top tier of quarterback can do. And so when you couple that with health concerns, I think that there's reason for them to go out and potentially look at an opportunity to upgrade. Now, the other thing that's hard for people to understand is every team is looking to upgrade every position. Every team, every position. The problem is the guys at the top tier of the quarterback position, you're not going to upgrade from. Like nobody's upgrading from Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes. But just about Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, everybody else is going to be up. You know, there's a plan in Green Bay. They've had a plan for half a decade. There's a plan behind Tom Brady. You know, all those things, there's always trying to upgrade that position. And so the reality of it is it's just in the 49er community's face because of what they gave up to get Trey Lance. And then the fact that they have such a good roster and they're so ready to win now, it just feels like everything is kind of on fire behind it. But for me, I think it's fine. I think the Jimmy Garoppolo thing in the locker room, people make probably a bigger deal out of it than it is. Now, I say that, and if you go, 0-6, it'll be a dumpster fire. But I can't imagine that they are. I think it'll be fine. I think that, to my point earlier, they're just trying to create the absolute best roster that they can. If he's going to take a pay cut and potentially come be a backup to a guy who's never played before, I think it's a smart move as an organization. Why wouldn't you want the best roster possible? Now, I'm also not in that locker room. I can't tell you, if those guys are best friends or if they're hating each other or if they're frenemies. I'm sure it's probably somewhere in between all of those things. But I can bet I've only been around a handful of quarterbacks that I would say aren't true pros. And so if you're a pro's pro, you understand your role. You want your team to do well. You want the guy who's playing to do well. And you're going to do your job to be ready when you get your opportunity. And so it can be all of those things. It doesn't mean it's easy for 49er faithful to understand.
Yeah, I think it's tough, right? Because you're right. Obviously, the 49ers is who we pay attention to. It does feel, again, being in the middle of it, it does seem a little over the top, especially from some of the bigger media members. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a quarterback after 3 starts have so many people who are talking heads and big figures say this is not working. This kid's not good. You got to go back to Jimmy. And to be fair, the 49ers have set themselves up, in my opinion, in a very unique situation. I can't think of, other than Palmer, who had Kitna come back and sit behind him, which was still a very different situation. This is a very unique situation, on top of the fact that this is a team that is, ready to win, or looked at as ready to win now. It's an interesting case study. I'll just put it that way. It's a very interesting case study.
I mean, I would push back and say, let's reframe this. All right. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Who's got the best quarterback room in the league? Who's got the most depth at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I would say 49ers and probably the Ravens are the 2 teams. Yeah.
All right. So let's roll. What more can you ask from a personnel standpoint? I mean, is everybody going to be best friends all the time? No. It's professional sports, but you want the most depth on your roster. You want the best at every single position group. I'd feel pretty good if I was in the 49ers building.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do. I understand it from a, an organizational choice type mentality for sure. Terradome says JT breaks down coverages and progressions and concepts like a hoopty on the 405. All right. I appreciate the contribution, Terradome. All right. You talked about Trey Lance a little bit earlier and some things that you're very excited about with Trey Lance. What do you believe are Trey Lance's biggest strengths that you've seen so far?
Well, I don't want to put necessarily artificial kind of bookends on what his strengths are. I think it's to be determined. I think what I'm most excited about seeing is Trey Lance stretch the field vertically. So just have a bigger arm than the 49ers are used to operating from within their offense. So you can stretch the field vertically deeper, more consistently. I think the other thing is just his ability to run and what that looks like. And really what that looks like with what many people would say in Kyle Shanahan is a really unique, creative kind of front edge offensive coordinator. And so for me, I want to see what that run game looks like over the course of the year. We saw flashes of what they were what they're thinking about doing in their rain game. You saw some quarterback power. I'm sure there's some other elements of it, but I want to see more of that wrinkled in really critical down and distance, because that, coupled with the vertical stretch of the quarterback run game and just their normal run game, their play action, they're the best in the business for a long time by being able to marry those things up. I think that puts a lot of stress on the defense. And when you can do that, stretch it vertically and quarterback run game and potentially horizontally with some perimeter screens, take advantage of what their perimeter skill players do, I just think it puts significant stress on a defense. And so what that looks like in real football conditions over the course of them improving over the course of a season, I think it's going to be really fun to watch. And then you couple that, for me, I'm interested to see how he uses them in the quarterback run game over the course of the year. I think if you go back, I always think of RG3's rookie year with Shanahan calling plays and how he lit the league on fire. He really did. Yeah. But he got nicked up. He was hurt, damn near, significantly impacted his career, how hurt he was at the end of that season playing. And so being smart about how you use Trey Lance in the run game, but also knowing, hey, we can use him. We got a guy who can play right behind him. So we're not going to hold anything back. I think it's different if maybe you don't have Garoppolo on the roster. You feel like maybe we can't run him as much as we want to. I'd go out there with a full cartridge and just let everything roll and see how good this kid can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's a question. It says, a question for JT should be, will Trey be elite eventually? I don't know if JT is going to give us absolutes on that, but do you think that he has traits that you've seen to eventually be elite?
Obviously you have to kind of define what elite means, but absolutely. I mean, the dude was picked third overall. I mean, he's got a ridiculous skill set. I think he's I think we haven't even seen anywhere near the kind of consistent flashes of explosiveness that we can see from him. I think the thing that will be challenging to people that follow the 49ers, and I'm not going to lie to you, I'm probably not going to watch every snap the entire year,
Yeah,
but it will be the consistency that maybe you're used to. So the consistency might wane, but the explosiveness should jump off the film. So it should be fun to watch. You should see more wow, spectacular plays. And I think when you're in tight games at the end of halves, this is another part that I would be interested in watching. At the end of halves, when you've got to rely on the quarterback to make a play, maybe the plays in the past that Garoppolo has been limited to be able to be that playmaker. Does Trey Lance flash? Does he pop with some explosive plays where you're like, hey, that's a Trey Lance play. That's not something that's orchestrated from Shanahan scheming somebody open, or the play action game popping someone open. That's Trey Lance making a play in the league when we need it in crunch time at the end of halves. And so those, to me, I think will be the real indicators of did they hit on Trey Lance or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And HBO asks the importance of playing as your teacher versus sitting and watching. So just playing versus sitting and watching.
Yeah, I think the playing part of it is critical. The other part about that question that I would say is you really have to reframe it. It's not either or. It's even when you're playing, you're still watching and learning. You might not be sitting, but you're watching and learning your film, your reps. It might be magnified about the intense level of it, but really you're always learning, especially as a young guy, even a guy who's been in the league for 10 plus years. Those things aren't lost on you. And so you have to be able to get out there, play and learn and watch. You're watching film. You might not be watching the game from the sideline. I think that there's not a significant amount of value from watching an NFL game from the sideline. But when you're sitting there playing and you're using those reps, you're using those practice reps, you're using those kind of feel ideas about different types of throws. Are you throwing it as far as you can? Are you ripping it as hard as you can? Are you showing some touch? Are you being able to change your arm angle? Are you understanding where your protection issues are? All of those things kind of you can learn from doing and learn from watching. And so those things never change and totally separate themselves.
Somebody asked a question. I can't track it down right now, but asks, who are your top 3 offensive minds in the game? That's a great question.
Oh, geez. I don't know if I have a good answer for you, bro. I mean, the beauty of it is like, and the people probably don't love to hear this, but I don't know. It's my own issues. I got a lot of issues. Okay. Like my own issues with I try to stay away from the whole list narrative thing. I just think it's lazy. It's like clickbaity. I've been kind of internet bullied into making some sort of draft list that I hate every year that I know will just come back and get me for sure. But it's like, it's worth it for me to do just so I don't have to keep answering the question.
Yeah.
But it's not really my game. Like, I don't care, like the top 3 people of this. I know only a handful of guys that are still calling plays. I only know a handful of guys that are still playing. And so I don't have that kind of like insider take where like this guy is the best scheme ever. I can tell you that the people that I enjoy watching the most are probably guys like Shanahan. Trying to think who else. Just because I love when I'm watching a full game, I love to see how they marry the run game with the play action and how they do that week in and week out. And so that to me is really when you're thinking about how an offensive is coordinated, that to me is what it means. It's how things are layered together. So how is the run game tethered to the play action, tethered to the pocket movement, tethered to the drop back? And are all those things in sync and working together? Because if they're not, well, then we're just, playing a video game and dialing up whatever the hell we want to. But if they're layered with a plan that's attacking a certain idea on the other side, to me, that's kind of the most fun. The other thing about it is, I just don't worry about who the best play caller is. I'm not like thinking about putting together a staff or like, who would be my this or who would be my that. Like, I guess I'm sure people do think like that. I'm lucky enough where I don't have to. So I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer for you.
You're not playing fantasy football with coaching staffs. That's that would be a new one. What's when you played? let's ask it in a little bit different way. When you played, what was your favorite scheme to run, regardless of coach? The multiple schemes that you were in, what was your favorite scheme to run that fit you the best?
Ooh, well, I can. I'll flip it a little bit and say I coached high school football the last couple of years, and
Okay.
our system was basically a cocktail of my favorite things. So it wasn't just West Coast. It wasn't just digit system. It wasn't just pure concepts. It wasn't heavy quick game. It was a combination of my favorite concepts, but in kind of what I would put a twist on, like a modern pro game. So more shotgun, more RPO, but also I personally think it's easier to teach gap run schemes at the lower level than zone run schemes. And so, you in the league, or for the 49ers, and many of the West Coast teams, it's all wide zone, outside stretch. Those are beautiful plays that work great in the league level when you get a significant amount of reps in offensive line working together with really athletic guys up front. But in high school, it's easier to say, hey, bro, you got this gap. Let's take care of that gap and go downhill. And so to me, it's just about blending concepts that I really enjoyed. And so if I had to answer that, I'd probably say the March stuff, just because I felt like it gave me the most answers at the line of scrimmage. Not that the West Coast stuff didn't. It was just the answers I felt like were like, hey, we're going to run this way. That doesn't look good. Let's turn it over and run the other way. It wasn't necessarily like, hey, no matter what's called on this play, we have an answer. Now, that answer might not be great, and we might have to deal with it afterwards, but I just felt like I had more answers with Mike's stuff than I had with other people's stuff.
Frisco says, why isn't Shanahan opening up the deep ball to expand the scope of the offense attack, to stretch the field and weaken the defense up? I think this question's tough because it's probably one of those questions that's like, do we even agree with that? And then we don't know everything that's going into a game plan and what was missed and what was hit and all those things. So, you can answer it if you want, JT. I just think this one's a tough one to answer.
No, yeah, I would say he's not. And then I would also tell Frisco to go outside and take the football that he can find and dump it into a bucket of water, and then throw it as far as he can straight. And it's not easy to do. And that's not even counting the fact that you're in a monsoon. And so you're just not going to do that in those types of games consistently. I would say I would be shocked and I would be disappointed if they are not throwing the ball deep, taking advantage of the play pass, play action kind of shot elements of what they're going to do. I think in the past, they've done a nice job of incorporating what I would call like middle tier play action passes. So like sail routes, overs, getting Kittle into space, maybe hitting the fullback on like a wheel. But to me, I want to see, I'm thinking like Tyreek Hill, like blow the top off the coverage, take advantage of what Trey Lance can do vertically with his arm. That's what I think people want to see. And I think that's what we will see. And so you can't do it when it's pouring rain in a monsoon.
Yeah, definitely makes it extremely hard to do for sure. And I think, not only when it comes to Trey Lance or Justin Fields, even, it's really hard to judge those players. I think it's hard to judge a lot of players. You heard Bosa talk about it was hard to get off the line as I'm rushing the passer because there's so much mud around me. It affects your game calling. There's just so much that goes into it. Those are just not conditions that teams are built around to play in. They just happen and you got to deal with them. So makes it a little bit tough. All right. What would you say is Trey's biggest area of opportunity? And again, not a lot of games. We're not speaking in absolutes, but just when you watched him coming out of college and maybe the few games that you've seen him play, where are some areas that you would like to see him improve the most?
I think the thing that jumps off the film so far is just his consistency of his ball control. And that's just really a fancy way to say, make the plays that are supposed to be made easy, make it look easy. There were some misses in the preseason to guys that are by NFL standards wide open and they're, low. He's just not consistent with his ball control and his accuracy. And that can be tethered to a handful of things. It's not one thing. And it's really hard to diagnose, from the internet. But I think when you look at just a consistent ball flight, ball control, that to me, I think will help take some of the not unnecessary, some of the valid criticism of his game up until this point and be able to say, hey, I can put the ball wherever I need to put the ball on any sort of like intermediate, shallow type of routes that will allow us to operate within that normal down and distance. So we don't feel like we're, third and forever, second and long. We can throw the ball on first down. That's the thing I think where and that's also like the low hanging fruit. Like that's the type of thing. If you spend time on that, those are things that will get better quicker than necessarily, some other elements where you're like, hey, we can't throw the ball down the field because our quarterback only throws it 40 yards. Well, that's not his issue. Like you can't, those issues are hard issues that you can't get around. He's not going to have that issue. He's going to have almost the opposite issue where you just want a little bit more consistency and being able to not only know where to go and how to go and when to go, the timing rhythm element of it, but just being able to be confident and throw it and put it wherever you want to guys that are open, that should be hit and in stride and take advantage of all that yak that y'all have been used to for so long.
It's funny because there's so many things that he does well that Jimmy doesn't, and vice versa. It's like if you could just mold their skill sets together, you would have the perfect quarterback. So hopefully Trey, as you stated, just can pick up on those things as time goes on. John says, JT, 2 questions. What is a reasonable timetable that you believe Trey will be fluid with his footwork, progression, accuracy in the system? And is it realistic that it could possibly be this season?
Reasonable timetable, I would put it on years. I think I think it's fair. It's not fair, but like the outlier for crazy improvement is always Josh Allen. You go back and look at some of his first year plan, and there's no indication that he's going to be the Josh Allen that we know now. Now,
right.
It's also not great to use outliers as the comparison, but that's just the reality of the elite quarterbacks. They're all outliers. Can it be this season? I don't know if I would use the word fluid. I think maybe comfortable. Yes, I think it's fair to say he could be comfortable this year. I think it will significantly increase the more years he plays. But again, I don't necessarily think he has to be fluid or elite in those terms. He has to be able to provide the somewhat of the stabilizing role that Jimmy did as far as the consistency, making the plays you're supposed to make, but then also has to be able to create, has to be able to use his skill set of stretching the field vertically, of using the quarterback run game, of using his legs all the time. But then in those moments where you feel like, hey, we have to go score. Well, you get those opportunities at the end of halves to go down there and score. Kind of like how we saw Herbert last night. They're down, you gotta go get a score. Nothing was easy about that. Nothing was easy. But his skill set allowed them to go make that thing a game at the end and really gave them a shot. And so that's, I think, those kinds of splash throws that I think that I want to see. I don't know if you can ever, when you start looking as far as consistency with that, it's, hey, can you do it multiple times when it matters on those drives that matter? And then, over the course of a season, all of a sudden you look like, oh, we made significant improvement. We did that a handful of times. We were able to operate in those tense, important situations that is essentially every week in the NFL.
Absolutely. Flav wants to know, which quarterback do you think would give the Niners the best chance to win more games this year, Jimmy or Trey?
Well, I would ask Flav. I don't really care. I would say I would rephrase this question and say, which quarterback gives you the best chance to win a championship? And to me, that's Trey Lance. We've seen what Jimmy Garoppolo can do, and he is a good quarterback that wins a lot. But in those moments, does he have the capacity to create? Does he have the capacity to stretch the field? Up until this point, and you couple that with some health concerns, the answer to me is no. You've identified Trey Lance as the guy you wanted to go get. You've invested all this draft capital. I think he gives and the splashes that I've seen, the few splashes within that handful of starts that he's had, to me, I think he does offer that, and I think he does give you the best chance to win a championship this year and beyond. Now, will it work out? Who the hell knows? But winning the most games to me doesn't necessarily matter. I want them playing their best ball after Thanksgiving with him hitting his stride and them getting a chance to go into the playoffs and make a deep, really important run because of the way he's able to create and make plays that maybe Jimmy Garoppolo can't. Yeah,
absolutely. Here's one for you, and we'll end on this unless we get another couple questions here. I know that, I want to be respectful of your time, but as a backup quarterback and a guy that floated around the league a lot, I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, you were rostered at some point by every NFC North team in the NFL, which is kind of crazy to think about. But as a backup quarterback, what is like the best thing you can do to contribute to the team and maybe help the starter be at his best? Like, what does that look like for you?
Well, I think every team is a little bit different. So every organization and starter is going to need something else. Sometimes you are essentially holding the starter's hand. Sometimes you're not contributing much at all. The starter's a Hall of Famer, and they've got it locked and loaded, and maybe you can help develop the bottom end of the roster, whether it's young wide receivers, running, certainly important how you run the scout team, certainly important to project kind of the model, the behavior that the organization is promoting as far as whatever their internal values are. But it's about doing the right things right, those types of things. And so I just think it's nice to be able to, I personally always like to have the capacity to essentially be a mouthpiece of the coaching staff, understanding what the plan is, where we're trying to attack, having those relationships that you build in practice so that during the game, you can maybe help with some adjustments. You can be an extra set of eyes to say, hey, they did this play. We might be able, if we come back to this, just take a peek. If we catch the same coverage, those types of things that I think can be really helpful that sometimes are tough depending on what the coaching staff dynamic is. Sometimes a quarterback coach has never played quarterback before. Sometimes a coordinator has never played quarterback before. Sometimes a head coach is a defensive guy. And so every staff is going to be a little bit different, but what that internal communication looks like. And I think it's important to just be a trusted sounding board for the starter. So sometimes there's something that, if you're playing, it's hard to, necessarily like not always agree with every single play call. You could imagine, like, I don't even know who the backup is in Denver this week, but you can imagine he and Russ probably had a conversation about how that went down. And that conversation was probably different than the one that Russell had with the coaching staff. And so I just think it's important to be a trusted sounding board and be a pro's pro to be able to help develop the team, help develop yourself. And then the most important part, and this is the thing that I think a lot of the guys who survive more than a handful of years in the league get, is you have to be able to play. And you got to be able to play without warming up. And you just roll in there and go out there and execute the offense at the highest level possible. And so all of those things is kind of the life in the league for a backup guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point, right? Because I'm trying to look at the 49ers situation. And I remember Josh Allen, I don't even know if it was the backup. I'm trying to remember who it was that he said, but last year he talked about, and I think it was the scout team quarterback, and how much he really helped him see the game and helped him improve throughout last year even, which I thought was interesting to hear and great to hear. And so I look at like the situation last year with the 49ers, and maybe Trey's not helping Jimmy out so much, but he really helped the defense prepare for some of those games, especially against mobile quarterbacks and whatnot. But then when we flip the script a little bit, I know everybody wants to pin Jimmy and Trey versus each other and those things. I feel like this is an area where, if done right, Jimmy can really help Trey see the game and help his development a lot, in between series and those types of things. So I think that's a great point out by you. All right, y'all. Well, listen. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the only other thing I was going to add with that group is, is Brian Greasy the quarterback coach?
He is, yeah, first year.
And so, it's a different necessarily kind of room probably to what was used to last year with, I think Skangs was there. But, it's just different. And so you have an added set of eyes, at least for that position, for a guy who's played in the league and has dealt with, Mondays that are terrible, and those types of things, and how to bounce back and what it's like, and just be able to talk through those things with not necessarily like, hey, do it like I do it, but just kind of the anecdotal, like, hey, this is part of playing in the league. And it is for damn near everybody to be able to battle through some tough weeks and tough games. And so it's just magnified right now for Trey Lance because it's week one. Everyone's overreacting. There's no other games. And so, he's probably as excited as anybody to get back out there and play.
Yeah. Chris coming in here at the Buzzard says, would you consider it fair to say that in order for Lance to fully grow, it's equally divided between Lance and Shanahan? Just a question.
No, I would not say that.
Okay.
Again, it's easy. I really, one of the things, and I feel like I keep repeating myself today, but the idea that things are not like binary, like this.
Yeah.
Like it's not, hey, it's on Shanny, it's all on Lance. It's so many people in the building. Now, those two might be the biggest portion of the pie, but you got to look at the entire offense. You've got to look at the coaching staff. You've got to look at, his personal development, off season, those types of things, taking care of your body, so many different things for him to fully grow as a player. I think those two guys certainly play a major role in it, but it's certainly on Trey Lance more than anyone else. Shanahan is certainly the main shepherd in what that looks like, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for your growth, your improvement, those types of things. And so, I would say it's a bigger, more complicated kind of pie of people part of the process. And the other thing about that is half the thing is just going out there and surrounding yourself with the right people. You look across the landscape of the league and a lot of guys who have been doing it at a high level for a long time have got the system around them. They've got trainers, cooks, their lifestyle, their diet, all those things go into what it looks like to do it at a high level for a long time.
Terradome says JT has a PhD. Shouldn't we be saying Dr. JT? Yeah, Dr. O'Sullivan certainly is fitting. He does have a PhD.
We're all right, Terradome. Unless we're at like an academic conference, I don't make people call me that.
Jonathan says JT's just casually sipping on Pellegrino water like it's a normal thing to do. I drink from the faucet. When it comes down to it, Jimmy had plenty of time and didn't improve in time to move on. Let the kid play. Yeah, that's it.
I feel like this is a very like San Francisco thing to do. No offense to like all my wine and cheese tailgaters, but I was like, I love a good Pellegrino. Yeah,
absolutely. And then Flav says, is there any point that the Niners should go to Jimmy other than injury to Trey, i.e. if Trey goes 1-4 to start the year?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a point. I don't necessarily think, I don't know off the top of my head what the record would be. I would think it would have more to do with the like glaring deficiencies in his play, whether that comes in week 6, week 8, week, whatever. Yeah, if it goes bad and they're, 0-8, well, everything's out the window.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to kind of your point, like how's he playing, right? Because I think the lazy thing to do is associate every win and loss to the quarterback, right? And it's like, well, maybe he's playing really good, but you have a ton of injuries, and so they're 0-8. But he's developing and doing his thing, or maybe they're winning in spite of him, and they still think, hey, you know what? Maybe we go to Jimmy because we're getting lucky here to win a lot of these games, and Trey's just not picking it up. I think there are multiple scenarios there as well. All right, JT, listen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. For everybody in the chat, again, link is in the description. Go subscribe to the QB School if you've not done so already, and I highly, highly recommend subscribing to his Patreon as well. Does some amazing breakdowns over there. If you like what he does on YouTube, you're certainly going to like what he does over on the Patreon channel as well. JT, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Jesse, I appreciate it. I'm probably, I will say this, like 95% we'll get a Trey Lance video next week. So excited.
Let's do it. All right. Listen, we got a Trey Lance video coming, and it looks like it might be in the rain again, JT, for whatever reason.
Maybe not then.
We'll see. All right, brother. You have a good one. Thank you, Chad. I appreciate it. Have a good one.